camera situation and not aware. All righty. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We've got a good meeting, I think, today. Hopefully you find it a good meeting. It's our first Science and Technical Committee meeting of the year. I'm back from maternity leave, so bear with me as I get used to being back in the swing of things. But excited to be back and with you all again. All right, so today we're going to do a quick welcome overview, dive into our Subbasin prioritization. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit about project ideas, but if not today, then we'll bump that to a later meeting. And then just wanted to share some announcements from our program and open the floor to everyone to share any announcements they may have. So again, just going over our schedule for the year. Our next meeting will be in April. We'll talk about Sea Stars. That's our Living Shorelines Monitoring Grant, where we're monitoring here in St. Andrews, Choctawhatchee with CBA, and then Pensacola with PVEP. So we'll give you kind of summary results of what we have so far. We've got one more year of monitoring going on, but we've got 2 years under our belt now, and some good preliminary data to share from that. So that's where we'll tack on any project ideas if we don't get to that discussion today. August, we'll talk about living shoreline suitability analysis. This is a project that we've been wanting to do for many years. We submitted back in, I think, 2022, and we now finally have the funding. So we'll talk about that in our August meeting. October, we'll talk about water quality. We've got a nutrient and microbial source tracking project that will be kicking off by then, and an EPA water quality grant as well. And then we'll finish out the year with our year in review and partner updates. So that's what our schedule looks like. Again, thanks for joining us. And we have other events throughout the year if you're dying for more. Any questions on our schedule? All right, let's go ahead and dive on in. So Subbasin prioritization. What are we even talking about here? So I wanted to back us all the way up to the CCMP. So many of you were along for the ride as we developed the CCMP. This committee in particular put in tons of time identifying the priority issues, focus areas, and actions, and then tons of activities underneath those. And so just for any new folks, the CCMP outlines 8 priority issues, 4 focus areas, and 28 action plans with tons of activities nestled within there. And so done a lot of work to identify all of these actions that need to happen. And now we need to figure out where we need to implement these actions. So really trying to use this prioritization to figure out where specifically in the watershed we need to prioritize to do different projects and actions. And the way that we're going to go about this is using a multi-criteria decision analysis framework. So this is just a really broad overview of what that looks like. It's a branch of structured decision making, if you're familiar with that. But it's got multi-criteria because we've identified multiple things in our CCMP that we want to account for in this subbasin prioritization. And so staff has kind of gone through and started to kind of already outline, and we've already done some of this legwork when we created the CCMP of what those decision alternatives, what the goal is of this, and even some of the criteria when we developed the CCMP. So staff has been working to kind of pull together what the criteria, what the data sets might be, and we wanted to give you a rundown of where we're at and get some feedback before we fully run scenarios. All right. Pause there if there's any questions. If not, keep on moving so that we can stay on time. Right. So before we dive into kind of where we're at, I just wanted to provide an example of a multi-decision criteria analysis prioritization. So this is actually with the EPA RPS tool. This is a scenario. The objective here is looking at nutrient management. And in this tool, the criteria that you would use to do this are nitrogen and phosphorus yield, nutrient paired waters, the percent urban land cover, and the percent agriculture land cover. And the tool kind of boils all of this down into a final index. It considers how you want to weight these different criteria, and then gives you this RPI index at the end. That's a very, very, very high level summary of what the tool does. It's actually a really interesting and useful tool if you want to go play around. The website is down in the bottom here. But essentially, this is our watershed, and we're looking at the HUC 12 resolution here. And so these are they're pretty big areas to focus in on, but what this is showing you is based on all of those criteria, they were weighted all of the same in this scenario. It's highlighting different areas on this RPI index, and the darker is considered healthier. So maybe an area that doesn't need as much action is darker versus the lighter areas. That's where we may want to implement nutrient management projects, for example. So you can see here, there's really just kind of two HUC 12 regions in our watershed that pop out from this scenario. And so our goal is something very similar to this, but hopefully at a finer scale so that we can really tease apart where these specific projects may need to be implemented. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure, North.
I'm looking at the map and I'm trying to decide the two lighter green zones on the Gulf Coast there. I'm wondering where Lake Powell is in relation to that. I can't quite tell from here.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's actually, I think it's on this one that has Alley's Beach. I think it's
okay,
right here. I think it might actually cross into this
okay.
darker one as well.
So it's in an area that's not quite as healthy as the purple up here, or whatever color that.
Yes, according to this, yes. Yep.
But that RPI index, it is there a cutoff there in a what would be called an impaired water? I don't or area.
So, yeah, so it pulls the nutrient impairments layer that it has outlined here that's based on like
Oh, I see.
TMDLs. So it's not really considering like the Baywatch data, for example, and if we would consider it impaired because it didn't meet the criteria so many times. So that's where us coming in and doing our own sub-basin prioritization will help us really refine this and be able to pull in our specific data for this area that's much more fine scale than those kind of like TMDL level information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or thoughts here? Right. So again, just an example of what this could look like. And now we'll kind of talk about how we can make this more specific with all of the information that we've learned since putting together that CCMP and all of the work that all of our partners have been doing to collect useful information for criteria. So what we've been kind of focusing on is thinking about this at the priority issue level. So a reminder for everyone, it's been ages since we've really focused in and talked about the CCMP, but we identified 8 priority issues. So those were sediment, community engagement, wastewater, stormwater and flooding, habitat loss, changing conditions, nutrients and pathogens, and then recreational opportunities. And so when we were creating these, kind of these objectives associated with them are things like reducing sedimentation, reducing nutrients and pathogens, habitat protection and restoration, and so on. And so what we've done now is identify criteria for each of these objectives and priority issues paired with data sets that can help us do this prioritization. So as an example, for our priorities issue sediment, we've identified criteria like soil erodibility, slope, land cover conditions, unpaved roads, in that whatever area we choose to go for. And then we've also broken it down to kind of what that metric looks like. So for soil erodibility, we're thinking about whether that area has highly erodible soil or not, simply a presence absence type of ranking. We can look at the average slope. We can look at the percent of natural land that's shifted to urban over time. And then look at the linear feet of unpaved road in an area. So that's what we've been working on. But then coupled with that, we've been talking about what scale. So in that example I showed you, we were looking at the Huck 12 scale. We initially started talking as staff about the water body ID scale. So that's a bit smaller than Huck 12s in general, and used by DEP a lot. But we've also been looking at using the catchment scale. And so just to give you a more zoomed in look at what this looks like, the black lines here are the WIBIDs, and then this tan color, those are the catchment outlines. So you can see if we go to this catchment scale, we're going to get a much finer resolution prioritization and hopefully better be able to identify where projects need to happen in a much more specific way than that Huck 12 scale and even the water body ID scale. So fortunately, for most of what we've been looking at, we can get to this catchment level with a lot of the data sets. So that's what we're pushing forward to do. And I'll just pause here for any questions. And I'm going to switch us to our spreadsheet just to give you an overview of the criteria that we've identified so far for the other priority issues and kind of open up discussion on that.
So looking at the catchment scale, that looks
Yep.
really, really small in
Yes.
terms of geographic area.
Mhm.
Are you anticipating selecting multiple? I'm trying to wrap my mind around your prioritization. If you did the WIBID scale, you're going to have a larger geographic area. If you go down to the catchment, then I mean, that may be one or two projects, depending on, I mean, it doesn't look like I'm just trying to eyeball. And okay, shaking your head, no, go ahead. Jess.
You want me to answer?
Well, you were shaking your head no, so I figured you had something to add to the.
Yeah,
Well,
so our objective with this is different than like what your watershed partnership objective is. So this
right.
is really just trying to understand what is driving the issues. And so we're doing it per priority issue. It's not like we're necessarily going to select one or two areas to do things in. It's more of what is going on and what is driving it so that then we can go in and identify some issues with our partners. So it's not necessarily, and I also think that many of the smaller catchments will be similar because a lot of the data that we're getting will be at that larger scale. So I the issue with the WBIDs is that it's too coarse for us to figure out what's going on and where. And so when we are trying to talk to partners in local counties and cities and saying, where's your projects? Where are your priorities? We're not being able to give them any sort of map to show like you have hotspot areas here and here, and we can't narrow down to what those causes might be in order to help that conversation.
Joy.
Hey y'all. Yeah, I was just wondering, they look like I don't know if my camera's working. They look like they are a bunch of different sizes. So do you have an average acreage of what these are, the size of the catchment units?
Not off the top of my head, but we can get that for you.
Okay, I just didn't know if y'all had that because it looks like they vary a lot. So
Yeah, they do, absolutely.
okay. Okay.
WBIDs vary a lot too, and you can see
Yeah.
that in the other figure. You've got some that are huge and some that are small.
Mhm. Okay.
So one other question, are you looking at one criteria and then looking at your heat map, or are you combining all the criteria and then looking at the heat map?
I think that's a great segue into the next step, Ryan.
That is a great segue.
Okay.
And that's why we're asking you today. That's what we want your feedback on. Okay. So hopefully this isn't too confusing, but I thought kind of walking through a couple of examples of how having multiple criteria and then changing the weightings of them can influence what pops. And so this is just with, again, this is at the Hut 12. We are shooting to be much finer, but in this tool example, this is the scale we have to work at right now. So in this example, everything is weighted equally here. I pulled in similar indicators to what we've identified. Oh, wait, I forgot to even go to the indicators we identified. So let me do that first. Back up, back up. I got too excited by your question, Daryl.
That's not a usual response when I ask a question. It's much better than the eyes rolling.
All right, so again, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I wanted to just show you all kind of where we're at with identifying the criteria and the metrics for the priority issues that will go into this prioritization. So we already kind of looked at sediment, but for community engagement, we're looking at things like the social vulnerability index. There are other ideas that we're trying to find data on, like local participation in conservation programs. One way that the RPS tool treats that is looking at like how many acres are in conservation easement, things like that. So we kind of have to tease apart and figure out what will work best for the way we envision the community engagement. Wastewater, we've got data on the known and likely septic locations in the watershed, the number of wastewater treatment plants, number of lift stations, sanitary sewer overflows, and things like that. All of those we can get to the catchment scale. For stormwater and flooding, we've got impervious surfaces, got the vulnerability assessment, flood risk layer. It's the compounding flood scenario, so includes multiple sources of flooding in one layer. We have some stormwater infrastructure data from the county and cities. And then we've also generated a stormwater runoff estimate via the curve number. Habitat loss, we can look at land conversion trends. And we've talked about kind of looking at the riparian buffer areas if we have time. Changing conditions, again, that vulnerability assessment will be important there. Looking at the shift from natural to urban land use, we've also have kind of like a wetland migration opportunity layer we can look at. Joy?
I think you just hit what I was about to ask. But I was thinking at it from habitat loss. But yeah, changing conditions. I was thinking about that future marsh migration space.
Yep. And so you'll see here, things overlap between priority issues, and that's been an ongoing conversation that really, I think we've all, even since developing the CCMP, the priority issues in general overlap. And so, yeah, there's some layers that might apply to different priority issues. Nutrients and pathogens, we have that specific data that Norm and I were talking about earlier from specific stations in our bays of like the total nitrogen and total phosphorus that we can look at and compare to exceeding criteria. We can take a look at ag land. And then our recreational opportunities, we have the number of parks, boat ramps, marinas, and things like that. So most of these we can get down to the catchment level. A lot of the water quality ones, not as much because just of where they're sampled, it tends to be bay segment or water body ID. So that's kind of our list of what we've been able to identify and find data on for these different issues. So I'll take a moment here in case anyone has ideas for this to fill in. We're still working on getting all of these layers to the catchment level, but we have acquired most of the raw data to do that. All right, jumping back to what I got excited about, Daryl. Okay, so again, back to our RPS tool example. Again, this is at a bigger scale than what we will eventually do. But in this example, I weighted all of the criteria I pulled in as equal. So just call it 1 across the board. So I pulled in the percent of protected land, the percent urban change, the number of nutrient impaired waters, the number of pathogen impaired waters, and then percent low income population. And so you can see when we weight them all equally, we're kind of getting this middle chunk here in the light green as maybe an area to focus in on. And again, you can play with how many breaks in this kind of index and where you want to identify what counts as somewhere to prioritize. But for this, I just wanted to give an example. So then if we play with the weighting a little bit, and I weighted urban change much higher than all of the others and kept the others the same, we see a change in the number of Huck 12s that get pulled out in that light green. So just to remind you, here in the initial scenario, we've got 5 Huck 12s that are pulled out, but when I weight the percent urban change, there's only 3 that pull out. But there's then a lot more that kind of get into that second category. So that's just an example of how changing the weighting of one criteria can play with where the prioritization lands. But then I was curious and think that we should evaluate what happens when we mess with multiple. So what I did was kind of weight by low, medium, high for the criteria. I kept urban as the highest and then weighted nutrient and pathogen impaired as 2, and then low income and protected land as 1. And we still get 3 areas that I kind of pop out as maybe a focus area, but they are different than when we just focus on the percent urban change. So again, just kind of showing you the different options and results that can happen when we change the weightings of these different criteria.
Hey,
So I'll pause here.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
That
go
was
ahead.
great because you were saying I'm fixing to pause here. So I just a little bit short on the trigger there. So
All
have
good.
you also looked at doing each category individually and then looking at that heat map? I guess what I'm trying to get at from that question is there any masking going on by lumping all the criteria into one analysis and then trying the weighting with all the categories included? Have you done a map for each category and then saw by category where the hotspots were and then compare those?
So are
Because
you thinking like each priority issue gets its own kind of map?
yes,
So in the tool right now, it's hard to do that because it doesn't have as many layers of data that's similar to kind of what we're working with. But yes, I think that will be an exercise that we go through to look at the different scenarios that way. And like Jessica said, you know, if the city's like, this is our big primary issue, let's hone in and look at sediment only and look at the hotspots for that specifically.
Yeah, the goal is to have like a prioritization layer per priority issue, and each prioritization layer would have multiple data sets worked into it, but those also have to be weighted. So we can look at the exercise of each one individually, but what we're trying to get to is like sedimentation, where the hotspots for sedimentation, looking at all of the things that can cause sedimentation issues. But yeah, the goal is to have a layer per priority issue.
Okay.
And then ultimately all of them. But as
Yeah.
Ryan mentioned, a lot of the times our partners have key priorities that they really want to hone in on that are different than their neighbors. And so we just want to be able to be responsive to that and have those conversations efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds like that's where I was trying to go, was just trying to
Mhm.
avoid the masking that you get when you start lumping. I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but I mean,
Yeah,
looking at the public engagement, I even thought about it between the different measures that you had in terms of, um, I forgot what the term was, underserved or
Mhm.
poverty levels. And then you start looking at community
Disadvantage.
groups and get engagement, because even those can mask,
yeah,
you know, each other, because you may not have high engagement in an area where people don't have a lot of resources to engage.
right.
So just keep that in mind. I know you are, but just having gone through this a few months ago, I know how challenging this can be.
Yeah. Fortunately, this RPS tool, you can upload your own layers in and play with the resolution that it goes to. So we may be able to use the RPS tool, some of it, and help us out, but at the very least, we kind of have the methods to be able to apply as needed.
On that note, Ryan, if on the data side and the data sources side, if it would be helpful, I can connect you with Garrett Ifland, who was
Okay.
our GIS person that was pulling data for our analysis. You probably are pulling from the same thing, but maybe there's something that we have that would be helpful. So
Yeah, that would be great just to make
okay.
sure. Thank you. Any other thoughts or question on these kind of example scenarios? Okay. So that kind of takes us to our big question for you all is kind of getting some feedback on how we should weight um, the criteria. And so I've created a little poll for us. And for this poll, I focused on kind of like the bigger, kind of more general weighting, because otherwise you're going to have like a million things to select of how to weight per priority issue. So once we do that poll for the bigger, I'll kind of pull back up our spreadsheet and we can look at each of the criteria per priority issue and think about whether we should be waiting or not. And just get your feedback on that. Let me launch that. It's so hard to get this done. Okay, hopefully the poll is showing for you. You have one person in the room right now, so I'm going to pull up a QR code if you want to. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do this.
Excuse me, this is Bill Fisher.
Yes.
I don't know, I don't have in the back of my mind all the different priority issues. So if I were to
Sure.
hit the second one, how do I look at them? I remember at the first glance, they didn't all look like they would be the same importance to me, but I don't remember them.
So question 3 has them all listed, but I'll also pull back up the list here on the
Okay.
slide. Can you see that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
So you're probably going to be shocked by this, but I answered the first one, which was how should we wait? And then I hit submit. I'm assuming there may have been questions below that, which was the 2 and the 3.
Yes.
Oops.
You
So
didn't
Bill,
read
you
through your
reminded
whole
me of that
text.
when you started. Huh, why didn't I see that?
I'll resend it to you, Daryl. I think I'd have to end the poll and relaunch it for you to do it,
Okay.
which would
Sorry.
make everyone have to redo it.
I'm sorry, Ryan.
That's okay. All right, we'll just give it maybe 1 more minute. All right. Does anyone need some more time? Oh, we just had a few more responses come in. Okay, I'll wait. All right, it looks like responses slowed down, so I'm going to end the poll. Share the results. Okay, so most of you said wait by priority issue, and then if we look here, whoops, I grabbed the wrong mouse. We got a few comments for other that I'm working on pulling up, but I'll skip that for now. So then if we wait by priority issue, got some great information on this. With the nutrients and pathogens kind of being the overwhelmingly highest priority, it looks like. Community engagement and growth opportunities being lower. See the other responses reading. All right. Well, thank you for doing that poll for us quick. And for those of you that wrote in other, I will pull that up after the meeting, so you don't have to bear with me signing it and getting it. Stop sharing that. Back to our framework. So again, kind of like Jessica was saying, not kind of like Jessica was saying, we'll have kind of one layer per priority issue, and then these kind of criteria here are going to have to likely be weighted. And so we can go through, be cognizant of time here, and maybe we can spend just a few minutes going through this. But kind of let's start with sediment. Actually, no, let's start with our nutrients and pathogens, since that's the one that people ranked highest as priority overall. So for nutrients and pathogens, we are here. We've got the fecal coliform or E. coli exceedances. We have septic system density, some sort of ag relation, like proximity to livestock operations. We've got our total nitrogen data, kind of the percent of exceeded stations, like our report cards, TN and TP, and then the number of SSOs. So of these, are there any that kind of stick out as a priority, higher priority than the others? Daryl, I see you're off mute. Do you have a thought?
I just have it muted. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
I thought you were looking at my face and saying you look confused.
No.
Are you, so are we talking about just nutrients and pathogens and should
Yeah,
the
just
individual
thinking
be
about
ranked
that
up?
single layer that you kind
Yeah.
of were mentioning. And if these are the only criteria going in, if we want to weight them all equally, or if they should be weighted differently within.
This is Bill, and I don't really know the area that well, but I know in other places where we've been that, you know, the septic system density is probably a fairly important indicator.
Yeah. We have a number that's around the bay and that we know are fairly old. There's just not great data on the ages of them, but we do have information on like whether it's a known or likely septic area.
Yeah. If there's really not that many and there's pretty good sewerage throughout the area, then it would drop in influence.
There's a fair number.
And again, the same thing. I don't have a feel for the number of SSO.
Also a fair number, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Several hundred each year.
Yeah.
So probably the most consistent one would have to be that fecal coliform measurements exceedance if it's measured regularly and using the same methods and in the same places, et cetera. That kind of, if it's a fairly consistent sampling program, then those exceedances would give you feedback regardless of whether it comes from overflow or from septics.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll change my vote, just
Okay.
not knowing much about the others, to just the coliform counts.
Yeah.
And along those lines, some of this comes down to where the sampling is, because if you're not sampling across the system, then if you're like the fecal coliform, for example, if you're only catching certain spots within the system, then that's going to pop out, and because you're not going to have any data in the other places. The other thing I was thinking is you're fixing to start a couple of projects, which is going to probably greatly impact this whole exercise, which is your flood reporting project, as well as, because that's looking at, hopefully it's going to be looking at actual what's happening on the ground. So you have people reporting floods versus looking at models. Having that actual data is going to be really, really, I think, informative. And then also your bacteria tracing and the water quality effort you're going to have, you're going to get, I think, much better data to drive this analysis. But I know that's probably a year or two out. So not that I have a point there, just want to throw those thoughts out.
Yeah, we had those things listed as like potential criteria and data sources, but with the timing of trying to complete this, they're like second tier. Whenever, if we have the chance to redo this, then we would redo it, including that information.
And I'm guessing I would focus or put weight on sort of the outcome measures, which would be your concentrations, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your fecal coliform, and seeing where those hotspots are. And then to me, it's kind of a couple tiered analysis where that's looking where your water quality impacts are, and then look at the septic tanks, the SSOs to try to drive or see what possible sources are driving that exceedance.
I was very much thinking the same thing, that in fact you might cut down the number of measurements you have to make by looking just at those TNTP and coliform counts. And when they reach a certain level, then you go to a second tier of testing.
Joy, you had your hand up.
It was a little bit of a tangent. It was kind of following up on a thread that Daryl had just said about future data opportunities, just throwing out that if TNC gets this money to do that Gulf ramp for wetlands, that down the road, don't know a timeline, that could be something that's used for that wetland migration data source as well.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we have a layer from TNC that has to do with wetland migration opportunity areas that they had completed initially for Suns, and that's what really kickstarted their WAP, whatever it's called. So we do have that layer at least. That's a start.
Awesome.
Oh, it's WHAM. So it's not SLAM, it's WHAM. That's what it is.
I would raise my hand, but I can never find it. Is it under React or something?
Yes.
Since I've already interrupted.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
I was going to ask the TN and TP, these are measured in the water column.
Yes. Yep. They're
And
monthly grab samples from stations throughout the
okay.
bay.
All right. Thanks. I just was not really sure.
Yep. All right, let's go ahead and we'll jump to do one more and then I'll shift to our announcements and we'll save project ideas for the next meeting. I think one of the next ones was, let's go ahead and do storm flooding. Kind of, I was going to suggest wastewater, but I think the wastewater and reducing nutrients and pathogens build off each other kind of in the way that Daryl and Bill were talking about with maybe using the data, the fecal TNTP exceedances, and then the other information as additional and it's kind of the same sort of information for wastewater. So I think that's maybe where that can come into play. So for stormwater and flooding, we've got percent impervious surfaces, the flood risk from the vulnerability assessment, stormwater infrastructure, and then stormwater runoff potential from the curve number. Any thoughts on kind of what might be most important for stormwater and flooding out of those four?
One thing you may want to, if the city and the county are tracking it, pretty sure, and it may vary between those local governments, but looking at repetitive loss properties, and I know there's a data sharing issue there in terms of like how much they can share, but general areas, again, going back to the what's actually happening might be a really good measure there, just to kind of like same thing with the nutrients, is looking to see where the problems are happening, and then
Yeah.
so I would do this for all your categories, to just say what's sort of the outcome that were the pain point that's causing concern, and then using the other measures to try to drive at what looks like the biggest root cause that's creating that problem.
Gotcha. Joy?
Yeah, I was thinking about that stormwater infrastructure layer. So maybe not just knowing where those are, if there's any way to get any kind of maintenance schedule, or repetitive areas. I think specifically, I was thinking, I immediately went to ditches and cleaning out ditches. And do you have neighborhoods where there are problems of people like blowing leaves or overgrown, ditches and stuff where they have to routinely go out and either clear out pipes or something. So I don't know if there's a way to catch that, but not just knowing where they are, but maybe the maintenance needs or repetitive maintenance needs or something.
I think some of our cities know that, some of them don't. Just depends. All right. Well, that was really helpful for us to kind of get a sense of where this committee is kind of leaning as far as prioritization and ideas on how to maybe find this list of criteria that we have. So in the interest of time, I'm going to shift us to keep going so that we can end on time. Oh, okay. So kind of our next steps, we're going to be completing these criteria data layers, running these prioritization scenarios with your feedback from today. And then we'll be evaluating results, collecting additional feedback, and making it an iterative approach that we can get the best kind of prioritization layers for us and our partners to use here on out. So other things I wanted to share with you all today, we'll shift to announcements from the estuary program. We have started a community flood survey. It's a drought essentially, so we have not gotten many reports from this, but we're trying to work with our stormwater committee to get the records of where they get consistent reports of flooding so that we can get that into our flood survey and kind of create a database with that information. But please save the survey so that when it does rain and there is flooding, you can report it. We're really hoping it'll be helpful for cities when it comes time to write grants. They really want to see like images of where the flooding is happening and knowing that it's happening. So we think it will be really powerful if we can get the information into the survey. So please save that for our next big rain event. Other things, we have our Tides and Tops program. So there's our next one is seagrass. It's on the 12th. In April will be gopher tortoises, and then in May, the last Tides and Tops will be on Incapina and Springs. So those are all at Destination Panama City, or they are on Zoom if you want to attend that way. Coming in person is really great though, so they can make the trek. The little back road towards Destination Panama City appears to be open, so now you can actually get into their parking lot, which makes it a little easier for people to attend.
They moved fast because that was still a big old hole last week.
Oh, not that main road. There's like a back road by Hotel
Oh.
Indigo that has been paved, and that was open last time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, man.
No, not that one. I think they just keep finding issues on that one. Yeah. And then I just wanted to share where the estuary program will be at some outreach events in the next month or two. So we'll be at the Emerald Coast Boat and Lifestyle Show, the Gulf Coast Salute Air Show, and then the North Florida Wildflower Festival as we start to kind of reach out into the counties that are kind of on the edges of our watershed. So that'll be exciting for the North Florida Wildflower Festival. And with that, I wanted to make sure we had time for any of our partners to share any announcements or events that are going on, any job openings and things like that. So please feel free to come off mute if you have anything to share or drop it in the chat. Norm, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, I guess, first of all, more relevant to the estuary program is that I'm now on the board of the Lake Powell Community Alliance, or I should say a second round after years. And we're beginning to plan some education outreach programs, but I'll have that coming along a little later.
Okay.
Audubon, on the other hand, with the birds, we're sponsoring our major Nature Connection event beginning March 21st and running through the 28th. The March 21st meeting will be probably of most interest to other partners, and that has to do with Doug Tallamy, who has started this backyard national park theme where you try to put native plants into your yard. And I noticed there was just a talk that I missed because I couldn't be there on the native plants, but he'll be talking about native plants, the benefit of native plants for habitat and birds, and kind of creating a wildlife corridor just by getting one neighborhood at a time or one house at a time. And that'll be the focus of his talk. He'll be here on the 21st, and it'll be at St. Andrews. I'm sorry, not St. Andrews, but Captain Anderson's. We have the announcement on our website, and I'm sure Alicia can point you to it.
Yeah.
But we also have the next week is primarily birds. In the intervening time, we'll be doing a lot of work with birds. The second end of our week-long activities will be concluded with owl expert from Colorado, Scott Rashid. So if anyone has interest in birds or owls in general, he's a really dynamic person. He'll be selling some artwork locally here. He's a beautiful artist, just incredible nature art. And in the middle of all of that, on the 27th, we have an immersive photo exhibit, which features nature photos from local artists and beginners and whoever. But it's going to be at the Bay Arts Center, and that will be open for about a month after it gets started. So it'll be easy to see, and it's kind of tied with the Ice War group. So it'll be a really wonderful experience.
Cool. Great. Lots going on.
Be a busy week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Joy?
Yeah, next week is our rescheduled 2025 annual partner membership meeting. So I know we're looking forward to seeing a lot of folks there. Wednesday, the 25th, we're going to be able to go out to NAS Whiting Field, and then in the afternoon do some hiking with the GC PEP folks and the Blackwater State Forest people. It should be a very nice day to have 2 field trips in one day, and then we'll have a social that night at the Prost Office Brewery. And then the meeting is on Thursday, the 26th at the Santa Rosa County Auditorium. And right now we're sitting at about 75 people registered for that meeting. And we've got about 50 scheduled for the field trips the day before. So a lot of great opportunity. Looking forward to seeing a lot of folks there.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else online have any announcements they want to share?
This is Bill. I don't have anything to share, but I would like it if Ryan or Jessica or someone could stay on after. I have a couple of questions about the program, and I have looked into the oyster restoration work that's going on, and I can tell you about that as well.
Okay, sure.
Unfortunately, I have to jump off. I have a foundation meeting I have to facilitate, but Ryan, if you don't mind staying on.
Yep, I can stay on.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. With that, thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Great meeting.